My name is Major Mike Webb, a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. And by way of introduction, if you are not yet familiar with me, I am a retired military officer with 2 decades of experience and training in force projection and force protection, as well as high attainments in both special operations and strategic counterintelligence. These facts, the subject of derision and disparagement by my most dedicated opposition, on evidence from persons not even within the congressional district in which I am a candidate, not even in this state, and in many more distressing instances, not even in this country, qualify me more than many activists I have encountered to discuss with authority the topic that has preoccupied my opponent, Don Beyer, and, according to his account, the voters in what is, by credential, the most educated distribution of voters in the nation, perhaps the world. And these facts additionally raise alarming levels of concern. At the outset of this nation, a very real and undeniable issue of religious intolerance motivated multiple persons who set sail to a new world, and a very real and undeniable issue of tyranny was sufficient motivation for them to convene a Congress of delegates amongst them to deliberate and set forth as decent men the reasons that compelled their separation. An unresolved but also very real issue of chattel slavery divided that union and brought that nation, so conceived and so dedicated, to the point of secession and civil war, and lingering remnants of that very real and substantial issue of civil and human rights for those emancipated persons and others relegated to a status of property, considered not to meet the threshold of persons or humanity, suffered through marches, trials, and protests in a civil rights struggle, but continue to manifest in forms even today, touching even the inner sanctum of a mother's womb. But regardless of our individual positions on these great issues of the day, they are not just figments of our imagination, but very real problems that rational and educated persons of virtue should possess the ability to resolve like responsible adults. The ruling class among a privileged elite within what is by highly stratified denominations, the highly educated and enlightened would probably view with contemptuous condescension the austere simplicity, plain dress, puritanical piety, and lack of degrees in education of what John Adams described at this nation's founding as a religious and moral people. But what they lacked in these quantifiable metrics, they more than compensated for in character and wisdom. For their concerns address the substantive and lofty issues arising from subjects like bills of attainder, impressment, due process, fair and speedy trial, double jeopardy, cruel and unusual punishment, excessive fines, unlawful searches and seizures, and a right against self-incrimination. And at the very base of this rule of law, even today, many a court opinion views with heightened scrutiny those infringements against basic civil and human rights in the context of criminal prosecutions, where there is a constant concern about the conceptual ideal of a presumption of innocence, so important and so critical that these offenses in a court of law, the evidentiary standard for them has always been that of not a preponderance of evidence, nor even a clear and convincing showing of evidence, but rather compelling those engaged in prosecution of criminal offenses to establish a case on the merits beyond a reasonable doubt to a reasonable trier of fact. a very rudimentary essential that is lacking in 3 years of dogged determination by purportedly educated people to pursue the impeachment of a not-my president. Those Puritans, Pilgrims, Huguenots, Quakers, Anabaptists, Roman Catholics, and others religiously denominated were not perfect like a Son of God who was proclaimed as their Savior. Yet nonetheless, they still yet aspired in their efforts not to haul a defendant into prosecution by prejudice of what only appeared to be inconclusory accusations and generalized aspersions, that which looked a lot like a criminal act or unlawful conduct. Yet in not even one panel of political pundits in the media has anyone ever established a credible case to merit that which has preoccupied the news and the nation and stymied the works of our government. Any law student in just the first year of study might well recite from rote, if not familiarity, the fact that any court, civil or criminal, eschews the notion of speculative damages for which the evidence that you woke up surprised one morning, or that you preferred a candidate who was defeated in an electoral contest, fails to state a cause of action upon which relief can be obtained in any court of law, and would be summarily dismissed, perhaps with prejudice in sanction for that which is both vexatious and frivolous in pleading to a court. However, and this is yet more distressing, the political affiliation and ideology that research data demonstrates to possess the most education on a highly stratified average, finding the plurality of its numbers far less educated than the mean, as is most evident in the achievement gap in the best public schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia, with a 200-point differential on college entrance examinations between a Caucasian student and a person of color in public schools, where the school boards are far more concerned about the names on the buildings than the education that is occurring inside the four walls of those institutions, engaged in what has been called perhaps the most important function of state and local government. These intelligentsia class persons, in a ranting rage of highly suspect academic supremacy, have engaged in a fraudulent deception founded in the farcical notion of a Russian collusion that had affected the outcome of a general election in 2016, for which they challenged the time-tested Electoral College, boycotted the inauguration, and marched in protest 500,000 strong, and continued in intransigent spirit against a not-my president through appointment of a special investigator, and are determined yet, even today, to press forward in the Congress to exercise their prerogative in investigation of what, on all evidence, is only amounting to an alleged criminal offense for which no magistrate would have found good cause to commence this prosecution. No proponent for impeachment has yet pled with any particularity the elements of a prima facie case for Russian collusion alleged to have affected the outcome of an election, which to an erudite observer should cause indignation, and motive for action to arrest and reverse this farcical course, but rather intoxicated by emotional rhetoric, credentialed academics and professionals have, with religious zeal, unconscionably rallied the masses, incited mobs in pursuit of vigilante social justice and liberation theology of a lynch mob of hooligans and ne'er-do-wells. Moreover, perhaps in providence or just mere serendipity, a very basic crime of sufficient concern to be specifically addressed within the founding document of this nation has brought forward credible and substantial evidence of serious concern of national import. corrupting our government, our courts and law enforcement, and even our merit-based civil service system. And evidence beyond a reasonable doubt has transfigured a felony offense punishable by a treble fine, 15 years of imprisonment, and disqualification from office to what amounts to a prima facie case for charges of insurrection against several individuals, a crime codified in 18 U.S.C. Section 2383, which provided from its enactment in 1948 that whoever incites, sets on foot, assists or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the United States or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. This is the recommendation, substantiated by credible findings and fact under authority of law, which I am prepared to and intend to bring to our lawful authorities in government to avert a growing national crisis that has already wrought irreparable damage and harm to a nation conceived in liberty and occasioned senseless loss of both lives and property. This is my solemn duty and obligation both as a citizen and, perhaps more importantly, as a soldier who took a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution of these United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. An oath that I took freely, bearing true faith and allegiance to the same without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of that solemn obligation to the best of my ability, and welcome your support, so help me God. So help me God. And anyone who believes himself or herself to be a patriot will not refuse this call of duty that is owed to our nation in this darkest of hours, this debt we owe to our founding fathers who entrusted us with some considerable and probably deserved level of skepticism with the legacy of freedom, and to our children and our progeny and our future generations on promise of the American way of life. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for Congress with liberty, honor, and excellence. By God, we shall make America great again. Honest. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Well, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.